forest smelled of pine and approaching winter. I pressed my palm against rough bark, steadying myself as drums echoed through the trees behind me. The bonding ceremony. Every unbonded wolf in Pinewood Pack was there right now, dressed in their finest clothes, standing in circles around the sacred fire. Everyone except me. My silver blonde hair caught the last rays of sunlight filtering through the canopy. I'd spent 2 hours brushing it until it shone, pinning wildflowers. I'd gathered myself into the braids. The dress I wore was my only good one, a simple blue cotton I'd sewn 3 years ago, mended so many times the hem showed different shades of thread. None of that preparation mattered now. The woman's breathing was getting shallower. I'd found her 20 minutes ago, stumbling through the underbrush, while everyone else walked toward the ceremony grounds. A flash of silver hair through the trees. A weak cry for help that everyone else was too focused on the drums to hear. She'd collapsed near the border, her leg trapped beneath a fallen pine that must have weighed 300 pounds. Blood matted her silver hair where her head had struck a rock. "You should go, child," she whispered, now her voice barely audible over the wind. Her face was pale, lips taking on a bluish tint. Shock was setting in. The ceremony matters for someone your age. And 25 years old, in wolf years that made me nearly ancient, to still be unbonded. My parents died when I was 16, leaving me with nothing but their cottage on the edge of pack territory and a debt that grew heavier every year. $47,000 they'd borrowed to start a small business that never got off the ground. The accident brake failure on a snowy mountain road took them 3 weeks before the first payment came due. Alpha Bennett had been understanding. $200 a month, he'd said. Pay what you can, work off the rest. 9 years of paying, 9 years of working 60-hour weeks at the Pack Lodge, serving meals in cleaning rooms for $12 an hour. 9 years of living in a cottage with a roof that leaked and windows that didn't quite close. 9 years of walking past young couples with their arms linked, their futures bright and unburdened. The bonding ceremony was supposed to be my chance. Not for love. I'd stopped believing in that particular fairy tale around the same time I learned to patch holes in my own roof. But for partnership, security, someone who might help me finally clear the $25,000 I still owed. Someone who could look at me and see something other than the girl whose parents left debt behind. Instead, I was here in the darkening woods with a dying stranger. "The ceremony doesn't matter," I murmured, though we both knew I was lying. I wedged a thick branch beneath the fallen tree, using a rock as a fulcrum point. Physics I'd learned from library books applied to a problem library books had never covered. "Not as much as your life." The woman's eyes focused on me with surprising clarity despite her pain. They were a remarkable shade of amber, almost gold. "What's your name, child?" Thea Ashwood." I threw my weight against the branch. The tree shifted half an inch. Not enough. I repositioned, trying again. My muscles screamed. I'd always been small, 5'6" and slight of build. Omega genetics. Nothing like the warriors who could shift into wolves the size of small horses. "Thea," she repeated softly. "That's a good name. Strong." I would have laughed if I'd had breath to spare. Nothing about me was strong. I was the girl who couldn't save her parents from a snowy road, who couldn't earn enough to escape their debt, who couldn't even show up to her own last chance at a normal life. The branch cracked. I stumbled, caught myself, found a thicker piece of wood and tried again. That's when I heard them. Footsteps. Multiple sets moving, with the kind of fluid grace that meant shifters, not humans. The forest had gone quiet in that particular way that meant predators nearby. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Who's there?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. I positioned myself between the woman and the approaching sounds, knowing it was futile. If they wanted to hurt us, my body wouldn't be much of an obstacle. 3 figures emerged from the shadows between the trees. All male, all tall and powerfully built. They moved like violence barely contained, like wolves who'd forgotten how to be human. The kind of shifters who made you remember that beneath the skin in civilization we were all animals. The one in the center stopped a dozen feet away. He was perhaps 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered beneath a dark jacket that looked expensive even in the fading light. Dark hair fell across his forehead, slightly too long, like he'd forgotten to cut it, or simply didn't care about pack grooming standards. His face was all sharp angles and hard edges, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, a nose that had been broken at least once. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Amber, the exact shade of the woman's eyes. They swept over the scene with calculated assessment, taking in the trapped woman. The bloodstains, my makeshift lever, my defensive stance. Missing nothing. You're on Pinewood territory, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. My hands were shaking. I clasped them behind my back so he couldn't see. The border is half a mile west. We're aware, Tij. His voice was deep controlled with the kind of authority that made you want to obey before you'd even process the words. Not quite an alpha command, those carried compulsion magic that made defiance physically painful but close. We heard someone calling for help. The way he said it made it clear he wasn't asking permission to be here. He was stating facts. The two men flanking him hadn't moved, but I could feel their readiness. One wrong word, and they'd react with the kind of speed that came from extensive combat training. The healers are coming, I said, though I had no idea if that was true. I'd been too focused on trying to free the woman to call for help. My phone was back at the cottage charging. I'd left it behind in my rush to make myself presentable for the ceremony. We don't need assistance. The younger of his companions, maybe 25, with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, let out a soft sound that might have been amusement. No offense, but you look like you've been losing a fight with that tree for a while. He wasn't wrong. My dress was torn at the hem and filthy with mud. My arms shook from exertion. Sweat plastered my hair to my forehead despite the cold. The woman's breathing had grown more labored in the time we'd been talking. The dark-haired man, their leader, clearly studied me with an intensity that made me want to look away. I didn't. Couldn't. Something about his gaze held me pinned as surely as the tree held the woman. How long has she been unconscious? He asked. She's not. I glanced back. The woman's eyes had closed. Her chest still rose and fell, but barely. She was talking 2 minutes ago. He moved forward with fluid grace, closing the distance between us in 3 long strides. This close I could smell him. Cedar wood. Leather. Something else underneath, dark and wild and dangerous. The scent hit me like a physical force stealing my breath. My wolf, silent and subdued as she'd been for 9 years of poverty and grinding work, suddenly lifted her head inside my mind. Mate, she whispered. No, that was impossible. Mate bonds were rare, precious things. They didn't happen to girls like me who couldn't afford new dresses or proper ceremony attendance. They happened to wolves with strong bloodlines and political connections and futures that looked like something other than an endless string of debt payments. But my wolf knew, and from the way his eyes widened slightly, the way his nostrils flared as he caught my scent, his wolf knew too. I'm going to examine her injuries, he said, his voice rougher than before. You can either help or get out of the way. Beneath the command, I recognized something else. The sound of someone who'd made too many hard decisions alone in the dark with no good options. Someone who carried responsibility like a physical weight and couldn't afford to set it down. I nodded once. He crouched beside the woman, his hands moving over her with practiced efficiency. Leg is likely broken. Possible head trauma. She's going into shock. His fingers were gentle despite their size, careful around the wounds. How long have you been trying to move this tree? 20 minutes, maybe more. Time had gotten strange, measured in failed attempts and growing desperation. You came alone. Everyone else is at the ceremony. He glanced up at me, then really looked at me. His eyes were gold in the dying light, almost glowing. Wolf eyes even in human form. And you left. She needed help. You don't know her. Does that matter? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or recognition? No, he said quietly. It shouldn't, though most people think it does. He turned to his companions, issuing rapid instructions. Between the 3 of them, they fashioned a stretcher from fallen branches, and the dark jacket he stripped off without hesitation. His shirt underneath was dark blue, expensive fabric that probably cost more than my month's wages. Scars showed through the thin material, pale lines across his shoulders that spoke of old battles and hard-won survival. They lifted the woman with synchronized precision that spoke of extensive training. Military, maybe. Or the kind of pack warriors who drilled for territorial disputes and rogue incursions. Where do you need her taken? He asked. The healer's lodge is on the eastern edge of the territory. But you can't, I stopped. You're not pack. The guards won't let you pass the border without permission from the Alpha. Then we'll take her to your border. Your healers can meet us there. It was reasonable, more than reasonable. They were helping without asking for anything in return, taking time from whatever business had brought them this close to Pinewood lands in the first place. I should have been grateful. But that scent, cedar and leather and something wild underneath, kept pulling at me, making my skin feel too tight, making my wolf pace restlessly inside my mind for the first time in years. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't thank me yet. He gestured for his companions to start moving. Stay close. These woods aren't safe after dark. We walked in silence, the woman on her makeshift stretcher between his two companions while he kept pace beside me. The drums had stopped. The ceremony must be over. Everyone would be celebrating now, new bonds, forming new futures beginning. And I would be returning late muddy with strangers in tow. Rowan Drake would have things to say about that. The Alpha's son had made it clear over the years that my family's debt made me pack property in all but name, that I should be grateful for the opportunity to work it off, that stepping out of line would have consequences. "You're quiet," the dark-haired man said. "Thinking. About—" I glanced at him. In the moonlight filtering through the trees, his features looked carved from stone. Beautiful in the way that dangerous things were beautiful, sharp and deadly and completely beyond my reach. "About what happens when we reach the border," I admitted. "The guards will want to know who you are, why you're here. And that concerns you. I don't even know your name. How do I explain that I let strange wolves help me without asking questions?" The corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. Would knowing my name have changed anything? No. The woman had been dying. Their identity mattered less than her survival. But it might make the explanation easier. "Tell them we heard someone in distress and investigated. Tell them we're returning to our own territory now." He paused. "Tell them whatever makes your life simplest." There was something in the way he said it, a weariness that suggested he understood complicated explanations and difficult positions. That made me want to ask questions I had no right to ask. We reached the border just as torches appeared through the trees, the healers accompanied by guards. Thomas, the head guard, stepped forward with his hand on his weapon. His eyes swept over the stretcher, over the strangers, carrying it over my disheveled appearance. "What's going on here?" His voice carried the authority of 30 years of service. "Thea, who are these wolves?" "They helped me," I said quickly, stepping between Thomas and the dark-haired man. "I found her collapsed near the border. They heard me calling for help." "You called for help. We didn't hear anything." "Because I hadn't. Because my phone was at the cottage and the drums had been too loud. And by the time I'd realized how serious the situation was, these three had already arrived." But explaining that would raise questions I couldn't answer without making everything worse. "They're leaving now," I said instead. "Returning to their own territory." Thomas's eyes narrowed. His gaze locked on the silver crest visible on the dark-haired man's shirt collar, partially hidden beneath the scarf one of his companions had wrapped around the woman's shoulders. "That's a silver crest insignia." The air went tense. Silver crest. The name carried weight even this far north. They controlled the largest territory in the northern packs, had the strongest warriors, the most powerful Alpha bloodline. They were the reason territorial disputes stayed manageable instead of erupting into full war. The reason rogue packs thought twice before causing trouble. "You know the protocols about crossing borders," Thomas said, his hand still on his weapon. "Unauthorized entry, even to render aid." "We're aware of the protocols." The dark-haired man's voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. "We followed them. We stayed on our side of the border until we heard someone in distress. We're returning to our side now, no harm done." "Who are you?" Thomas demanded. "I need a name for my report." The dark-haired man's gaze found mine one last time. Something passed between us in that look. Acknowledgement of the connection we both felt, recognition that this moment mattered in ways neither of us could explain yet, understanding that whatever came next would change things. Then he nodded once and turned away. "Wait," I called out before I could stop myself. He paused but didn't turn around. "I don't even know your name." Now he did turn, looking back over his shoulder. In the torchlight, his eyes gleamed gold. "Does it matter?" I'd said almost the same thing to him earlier. The echo made my chest tight. "Yes," I whispered. He studied me for a long moment. Then Kyle. Just the one word. No pack name, no title, no explanation. But the way Thomas went very still beside me suggested it was enough. More than enough. "Thank you, Kyle," I said. He inclined his head slightly, an acknowledgement, maybe even a promise, and disappeared into the forest with his companions. The healers rushed forward to tend to the woman. Thomas stood rigid beside me, his expression caught between shock and something that might have been fear. "Do you have any idea who that was?" he asked quietly. My stomach dropped. "No. That was Kale Stormridge." Thomas's voice was barely above a whisper. "Alpha of Silver Crest. The most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories." The forest spun. I grabbed a tree trunk for support, my legs suddenly unsteady. The stranger who'd knelt in the dirt beside me. Who'd helped without hesitation. Who'd carried authority like a second skin and scars like medals. who'd looked at me like he saw something more than a girl with debt and torn dresses. An alpha. Not just any alpha. The Alpha King of the North. That's impossible, I whispered. But I could still smell cedar and leather on the air. Could still feel the weight of his gaze. Could still hear my wolf whispering mate with absolute certainty. Thomas shook his head slowly. Impossible or not, it's true. And you just let the Alpha King help you without knowing who he was, without following any protocol, without... He cut himself off, running a hand through his graying hair. Alpha Bennett will want to speak with you immediately. The healers were loading the woman onto a proper stretcher now. She was breathing easier, color returning to her face. She would live. Whatever consequences came from tonight, at least I had that. Is she Pack? I asked. I don't know. Thomas studied the woman's face in the torchlight. I've never seen her before, but if Alpha Stormridge was looking for her, she must be important. Important enough for an Alpha King to cross into another Pack's territory. Important enough to risk diplomatic complications. Important enough that my decision to help her might have just made my complicated life infinitely more complicated. The drums had long since fallen silent. The ceremony was over. New bonds had formed, new futures had begun, and I had missed all of it. Again. I looked down at my ruined dress, my muddy hands, my torn hem, looked at the blood on my sleeves from where I tried to stop the woman's bleeding, looked at the forest path where Cale Stormridge had vanished. The woman on the stretcher stirred her eyes opening. They were the same amber gold as Cale's. She looked directly at me and smiled a real smile, warm despite her pain. Thank you, child, she whispered. You have a kind heart. That will matter more than you know. Then the healers whisked her away toward the lodge, and I was left standing at the border with Thomas and the dying torchlight, and the weight of what I'd just done settling onto my shoulders like snow. I didn't sleep that night. The cottage was cold, the fire in the hearth having burned down to embers while I was in the forest. I rebuilt it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, adding logs one by one, until the flames rose high enough to push back the darkness. Not that light helped. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw amber gold eyes looking at me with an intensity that made breathing difficult. Mate. My wolf wouldn't stop saying it, wouldn't stop pacing. For 9 years, she'd been so quiet I sometimes forgot she existed. The debt, the poverty, the grinding sameness of my life, it had all pressed down on her until she'd curled up small and silent inside my mind. But now she was awake and restless and absolutely certain about something that made no sense. Cale Stormridge couldn't be my mate. Alpha Kings didn't mate with Omega girls who owed $25,000 to their pack, who wore dresses sewn from discount fabric and served meals to wolves who never bothered learning their names, who'd missed the bonding ceremony because they were too busy saving strangers in the forest. But my body knew his scent. My skin remembered the electric jolt when he'd moved past me, close enough that I'd felt his body heat. My wolf recognized him on a level that had nothing to do with logic or social standing or the massive gulf between Alpha King and indebted Omega. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat by the fire watching shadows dance across the walls. The cottage was small, just one main room with a sleeping alcove, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom that barely deserved the name. But it was mine. The only thing my parents had left me besides debt. I'd patched every hole in the roof myself, replaced the broken windows with salvaged glass, fixed the sagging porch steps with wood scraps from the Pack lumber yard. 9 years of making do. 9 years of surviving. A knock on the door made me jump. It was past midnight. No one came to the cottage this late unless something was wrong. I set the blanket aside and crossed to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Thea, Rowan Drake's voice. Open up. My father wants to see you. Of course he did. The Alpha didn't summon people in the middle of the night for pleasant conversations. I took a breath, trying to steady my racing heart, and opened the door. Rowan stood on my porch in his formal ceremony clothes, looking irritated at having to make the trip. He was handsome in the way that wolves from strong bloodlines usually were, tall, well-built, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about debt or survival. We'd grown up together, but the years had carved a canyon between us. He'd become the Alpha's son heir to Pack leadership. I'd become the girl who cleaned his family's lodge. Now, I asked. Yes, now. He looked me over, taking in my muddy dress that I hadn't bothered changing. You might want to make yourself presentable first. I almost laughed. Presentable. As if I owned anything that would qualify. As if changing clothes would somehow make this midnight summons less terrifying. Give me 5 minutes. He nodded curtly and stepped back to wait. I closed the door and moved to the alcove where I kept my few belongings. The blue dress went into the corner to be washed later. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, both old, both worn soft with time and repeated mending. Ran a brush through my tangled hair and braided it back. Splashed water on my face from the basin. This was as presentable as I got. Rowan didn't speak as we walked through the sleeping village toward the pack house. It loomed at the center of Pinewood's territory, a massive log structure that had housed pack leadership for 3 generations. Lights burned in the Alpha's office on the 2nd floor. Inside, Alpha Bennett sat behind his desk with his hands folded. He was 60 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of making hard decisions. He'd been fair to me after my parents died. Fair but not kind. The debt was real. The work was necessary. My situation was unfortunate, but not his problem to solve. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat. Rowan positioned himself by the door, blocking my exit or guarding his father, I wasn't sure which. "Thomas tells me you encountered Alpha Stormridge tonight," Bennett began without preamble. "In the forest, while the bonding ceremony was taking place." "Yes, Alpha. He says you were helping an injured woman. That Stormridge and his companions assisted you." "Yes, Alpha." "Did you know who he was?" "No, Alpha. Not until after he'd left." Bennett studied me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You left the bonding ceremony, the most important night for unbonded wolves. You left to help a stranger." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, Alpha. That was foolish." I swallowed hard. She was dying. She was a stranger on the edge of our territory. You had no obligation to her. He leaned forward. "But you did have an obligation to your pack, to be present at the ceremony, to participate in the bonding that strengthens our community." "I'm sorry, Alpha." The words tasted like ash. I wasn't sorry. Given the same choice, I'd do it again. But admitting that would only make things worse. "The woman you saved, do you know who she is?" "No, Alpha. Her name is Morel Stormridge." He let that sink in. Alpha Kale's mother, the Queen Mother of Silvercrest. The room tilted. I gripped the chair arms to keep from swaying. The woman in the forest. The silver hair, the amber gold eyes, the way Kyle had looked at her with such barely controlled fear. His mother. "I didn't know," I whispered, clearly. Bennett sat back. "Silvercrest sent a formal communication this morning. Alpha Stormridge is requesting to speak with you. He's coming here this afternoon." My heart stopped. "Why?" He didn't say. But when the Alpha King of the Northern Territories requests an audience, we don't ask why. We comply. His gaze hardened. "You will be present at the meeting. You will answer his questions honestly. You will do nothing to create a diplomatic incident. Do you understand?" "Yes, Alpha. Your debt to this pack already makes you a liability. Don't compound it by causing trouble with Silvercrest." He waved a hand in dismissal. "You're excused. Be at the pack house at 2 o'clock. And Thea." I turned back. "Wear something appropriate." As if I owned something appropriate for meeting with an Alpha King. Rowan walked me back to the cottage in silence. At my door, he finally spoke. "You should have stayed at the ceremony." "I know. You could have bonded, found a mate, started clearing your debt." "I know." He shook his head. "Instead, you're in deeper trouble. The Alpha's furious you missed the ceremony. And now we have Silvercrest's attention. Do you have any idea how carefully we have to navigate our relationship with them? How one wrong move could—" He cut himself off. "Never mind, just don't make this worse than it already is." He left me standing on my porch in the pre-dawn darkness. I went inside and sat by the fire again, watching the sky lighten through the window. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the pine trees gold. It was going to be a beautiful day. And I was going to spend it facing the one wolf in the world who made my heart race and my wolf sing and my future feel suddenly terrifyingly uncertain. The village transformed while I waited. By noon, every street had been swept clean. Windows that had gone unwashed for months suddenly gleamed. The pack house lawn, typically scattered with fallen pine needles and the debris of daily life, looked manicured to perfection. Children were herded indoors. Laundry vanished from clotheslines. Even old Mrs. Chen, who'd lived in the same cottage for 60 years and never cared what anyone thought, had swept her porch. Pinewood Pack was preparing for royalty. I stood in my cottage staring at the contents of my closet with something close to despair. 3 pairs of jeans all worn thin at the knees, 5 sweaters in various stages of unraveling, 2 dresses, the blue one still muddy from last night, and a gray one I'd bought at a thrift store 4 years ago for a funeral. Work shirts, thermal underwear, a winter coat held together more by patches than original fabric. Nothing appropriate for meeting an Alpha King. I chose the gray dress. It was simple, long-sleeved, fell to mid-calf. The color washed me out, made my pale skin look almost translucent, and my silver blonde hair seemed dull rather than striking. But it was clean and whole, and the best I had. My reflection in the cracked mirror over the bathroom sink showed a girl who looked younger than 25. Uncertainty in pale blue eyes. Anxiety in the tight line of her shoulders. Hair braided back because I couldn't afford the kind of products that made it fall in artful waves like the beta's daughters wore theirs. I looked like what I was. An omega with no prospects and less money. The walk to the pack house felt like a march to execution. Wolves lined the streets, ostensibly going about their business, but actually watching, waiting. News had spread. Everyone knew Alpha Stormridge was coming. Everyone knew he was coming because of me. I kept my eyes forward and my pace steady. Showing fear would only make it worse. These were wolves who'd known me since childhood, who'd watched my parents die, and my debt accumulate, and my chances narrow year by year. They weren't cruel, most of them, just practical. Survival required knowing which wolves were assets and which were liabilities. I'd been a liability for 9 years. The pack house rose before me, its log walls solid and imposing. Alpha Bennett stood on the front steps with Rowan beside him. Both wore formal clothes, dark suits that probably cost more than my monthly wages. Other pack elders gathered nearby, the council members who helped Bennett make decisions about territory and resources and justice. "You're early," Bennett said as I approached. Not quite approval in his voice, but not quite disapproval either. "Yes, Alpha." "Good. We'll wait inside." He gestured toward the door. "Remember what I said. Answer his questions honestly. Don't volunteer information. Don't make promises or commitments. Am I clear?" "Yes, Alpha." The great room had been arranged like a courtroom. The chairs formed a semicircle with Bennett's position at the center, clearly marking him as pack authority. A separate chair sat facing them for me, I realized with a sinking stomach. And past that, closer to the door, 3 chairs waited empty. For Cale Stormridge and whoever he brought with him. I took my assigned seat and folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. The elders filed in, taking their positions. Rowan stood behind his father's chair, his expression unreadable. Through the windows, I could see pack members gathering outside as close as they dared. Everyone wanted to witness this. At precisely 2 o'clock, a truck pulled up outside. Not the expensive vehicles I'd expected. A Ford F-250 black, a few years old, splattered with mud from mountain roads. Practical. The kind of truck designed for actual work rather than status. Through the window, I watched Kyle step down from the driver's seat. Daylight didn't diminish him. If anything, it made him more striking. He wore dark jeans and a black button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing forearms marked with old scars. No suit, no formal wear. He looked like he'd come from a work site rather than a palace. But the power in the way he moved, the absolute confidence in his bearing, announced his status more clearly than any crown could have. His 2 companions followed him, the same wolves from last night. The younger one with the easy smile, the silent one who moved like a shadow. They climbed the steps, the door opened, and suddenly the room felt smaller. The air heavier, charged with the kind of energy that came from a predator entering contained space. Cale's gaze swept the room. Past Bennett, past the elders, past Rowan's hostile stance. It found me and stopped. The impact of his attention stole my breath. Those amber gold eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my wolf rise to the surface, made my skin flush with heat despite the cool air. For 3 heartbeats, it was just us. Just the pull of something I didn't understand drawing tight between us, like a rope. Then he looked away and I could breathe again. "Alpha Bennett." Cale's voice carried authority without effort. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Bennett stood, inclining his head with the respect due to a superior alpha. "Alpha Stormridge, you honor us with your presence. Please sit." Cale moved to the center chair. His companions flanked him, but remained standing guards clearly, though they wore no uniforms or weapons that I could see. Up close, the scars on Cale's forearms were more visible. Burns, I realized, and what looked like claw marks. This was a wolf who'd seen combat. "I'll be direct," Cale said, his gaze returning to me. "The woman who was injured last night is my mother, Morel Stormridge. Your pack member found her and chose to help despite the personal cost. I'd like to speak with her about that choice." Bennett gestured toward me. "Thea Ashwood. She's available to answer your questions." For the first time, Cale's expression shifted. Something flickered across his features, surprise maybe, or recognition. "Ashwood," he repeated quietly. "Yes, Alpha." Bennett's tone carried an edge. Her parents died 9 years ago. She's been working off their debt since. I see. Kale's eyes hadn't left my face. May I speak with her directly? It wasn't really a request. When an Alpha King asked permission, refusal wasn't actually an option. Bennett knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. Of course, Bennett said. Kale rose and crossed to stand before me. This close, his scent overwhelmed everything else. That same blend from last night, but different in daylight, wood smoke and autumn rain layered over cedar. He was tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Hello, Thea. My name and his voice did strange things to my heartbeat. Alpha Stormridge. Just Kyle. He crouched down, bringing himself to my eye level. The casual intimacy of the gesture sent murmurs through the room. Alphas didn't crouch before Omegas, didn't lower themselves. The hierarchy was built into pack structure as surely as bones were built into bodies. But Kyle crouched before me like it was the most natural thing in the world. My mother told me what you did, he said quietly, his voice pitched for my ears alone despite the room full of witnesses. You left your bonding ceremony, the most important night for an unbonded wolf. You left to help a stranger in the dark. She was dying. You didn't know her. Didn't know if she was friend or enemy. Didn't know if helping her would bring danger. His eyes searched mine. Why did you do it? The honest answer felt too revealing, too vulnerable. But he'd asked directly, and something about the way he looked at me made lying impossible. Because I couldn't not do it, I said. Because leaving someone to die when I could help, that would have made me someone I didn't want to be. Silence fell over the room. Kale studied me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he nodded slowly and stood. Alpha Bennett, he said, turning to address the pack leader. The Continental Summit begins in 3 weeks. Every major pack from the Northern Territories will be represented. It's a gathering of political significance. We're aware, Bennett said carefully. Pinewood typically doesn't receive an invitation. We're too small to warrant. I'm not inviting your pack. Kale's interruption was polite but firm. I'm asking if Thea Ashwood would accompany me as my guest. The room erupted, elders talking over each other, Rowan stepping forward with his hands clenched, Bennett raising a hand for silence that no one obeyed, and me sitting frozen in my chair trying to process words that didn't make sense. Accompany him. To the Continental Summit. Me. That's highly irregular, Bennett said when he'd finally restored order. Thea has no training in diplomacy, no experience with pack politics. He stopped himself from saying what everyone was thinking. She's nobody. She has integrity, Kale interrupted. His voice carried steel beneath the courtesy. I've met diplomats and advisors and wolves with decades of political training. They're skilled at performance, at saying what they think I want to hear, at maneuvering for advantage. He looked at me again. But integrity wolves who make choices based on what's right rather than what's beneficial, that's rare. And at the summit, surrounded by posturing and manipulation, I need someone real. With respect, Rowan spoke up, his tone barely civil. She's in debt to this pack. Significant debt. She has obligations here. Kale's gaze shifted to Rowan. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. What debt? $47,000 her parents borrowed. She's been paying it off at $200 a month for 9 years. She still owes $25,400, I said quietly. The exact number was burned into my brain. 72 more months of payments. 6 more years of my life measured out in $200 increments. Kyle pulled a checkbook from his pocket, crossed to Bennett's desk, wrote with swift, decisive strokes, tore off the check and handed it to Bennett. $30,000, he said. The debt is paid. The extra $4,600 goes to Miss Ashwood for 9 years of work. Bennett stared at the check like it might bite him. Rowan had gone pale. The elders whispered furiously among themselves, and I sat frozen, my mind unable to process what had just happened. 9 years. 9 years of scrimping and saving and working until my hands cracked and bled. 9 years of watching every dollar, choosing between fixing the roof and buying groceries, wearing clothes until they were more patch than original fabric. 9 years of debt hanging around my neck like a millstone. Gone. With one signature. This is unnecessary, Bennett said, but his hand was already folding the check carefully. $30,000 was more money than Pinewood saw in months. Refusing it wasn't really an option. Thea's debt could have been resolved through traditional means. It's resolved now. Kale's tone left no room for argument. He turned back to me. The decision is yours, Thea. You're not obligated to anyone anymore. Not to your pack's debt, not to me for paying it. If you want to stay here, no one will stop you. He paused, his eyes holding mine. But if you come with me, you'll see the summit, meet wolves from every major pack, learn how territorial politics actually work. Another pause. And you'll be safe, I give you my word on that. Safe. The words settled into my chest like a promise I'd never dared hope for. When had I last felt safe? Not since my parents died. Not since debt and poverty and the constant awareness of being one disaster away from losing everything became my daily reality. How long would I be gone? My voice came out steadier than I felt. 3 weeks total, 2 weeks at Silver Crest for preparation and training, 1 week at the summit itself. 3 weeks, 21 days away from Pinewood, away from the cottage with its leaking roof and broken windows, away from the pack lodge where I served meals to wolves who never learned my name, away from Rowan's reminder that my family's debt made me pack property. I looked at Alpha Bennett, at the elders, at Rowan's furious expression, at the life I'd been living for 9 years stretching ahead of me into a future that looked exactly like my present. Then I looked at KO, at the patient certainty in his eyes, at the way he'd crouched down to my level instead of looming over me, at the scars on his forearms that spoke of battles survived, and the way he'd helped a stranger in the forest without asking for anything in return. My wolf knew, had known from the first moment his scent hit me like lightning. Mate. Not because of his power or his wealth or his status, because of something deeper, something that recognized him on a level that had nothing to do with logic. Yes, I said, I'll go with you. The next hours passed in a blur of arrangements and protests. Bennett arguing that I needed pack permission despite the debt being paid. Kale politely but firmly stating that free wolves didn't need permission to travel. Rowan insisting I wasn't prepared for summit politics. Kale responding that 2 weeks of preparation would address that concern. Finally, Bennett conceded, possibly because $30,000 had already changed hands. Possibly because refusing an Alpha King's direct request would create diplomatic complications Pinewood couldn't afford. Possibly because debt paid, I truly wasn't pack properties anymore, and he had no legal grounds to stop me. When do we leave? I asked KO when the arguing finally ceased. Tomorrow morning, dawn. He studied my face. Is that too soon? Too soon to leave behind 9 years of grinding poverty. Too soon to step into a future I couldn't predict or control. No, I said. That's fine. His mouth curved slightly, almost a smile. Pack light. We'll have everything you need at Silver Crest. The black Ford truck was already waiting when I reached the village center at dawn. Kale stood beside it, dressed in jeans and a heavy jacket, his breath fogging in the cold morning air. His companions were nowhere in sight, probably already in the truck. A small crowd had gathered to watch. Not the whole pack, but enough. Curious wolves who wanted to see the Omega who'd caught an Alpha King's attention. Skeptical wolves who expected this to end badly. Worried wolves who thought I was making a terrible mistake. Rowan stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. I walked to the truck. Kale took my duffel bag without comment on how light it was, how little I owned, how pathetic it looked compared to what he probably expected. He just stowed it in the back and opened the passenger door. Ready? He asked. Was I ready to leave everything I'd known, to step into a world of Alpha Kings and continental summits and political maneuvering? I didn't understand, no. I wasn't ready. I climbed into the truck anyway. Yes, I said. Through the window I watched Pinewood Pack grow smaller. The village where I'd grown up. The cottage where I'd survived 9 years alone. All of it disappearing behind us as we drove north into mountains I'd never seen. The sun rose over the peaks, painting the snow gold. After an hour, KL spoke. You can ask questions, if you have them. I had hundreds. I asked the safest one. How is your mother? His expression softened. Better. The healers say she'll recover fully. The head injury was worse than we thought, but she's strong. He paused. She asked about you, wanted to know your name. You told her Thea Ashwood. I told her the girl who saved her life chose compassion over her own future. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel. She said that kind of choice reveals character, that you can train diplomacy and politics and negotiation, but you can't train integrity. She sounds wise. She is. He glanced at me again. She's also going to want to thank you personally. Fair warning, she's not good at keeping gratitude subtle. We drove through mountain passes where the road clung to cliff faces, past abandoned mining towns and frozen lakes, through forests so dense the trees blocked the sun. How far is Silver Crest? I asked. Another 3 hours. We're in pack territory now, have been for the last 30 minutes. But the main settlement is deeper in, more protected. Protected from what, I wondered. As if reading my thoughts, KL said rogues, rival packs, wolves who think killing an alpha king would earn them reputation and power. He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing weather. The remote location makes uninvited approaches difficult. Has anyone tried 3 times in the last 5 years? His jaw tightened. They didn't succeed. I thought about the scars on his forearms, the way he moved like violence barely leashed. This wasn't a wolf who'd inherited power and rested on it. This was a wolf who'd fought for every inch of territory he held. The scar on your back, I said before I could stop myself. How did you get it? He was quiet for so long and I thought he wouldn't answer. Then territorial dispute 3 years ago. Eastern Coalition thought Silvercrest was vulnerable after my father died. They were wrong. His voice went hard, but they got close enough to leave a reminder. Father died, past tense, loss in his voice that matched the loss I carried from my own parents. I'm sorry, I said softly. Me too. Another pause. I was 19 when he was killed, ambushed during what was supposed to be a peaceful negotiation. I took over leadership the next day because the pack needed an alpha, and there was no one else. 19. Younger than I was now, thrust into leading 3,000 wolves with no preparation and enemies circling like sharks. That must have been terrifying. It was. He glanced at me, something vulnerable in his eyes. Still is some days. Leadership is making decisions where all the options are bad and people die regardless of what you choose. Without thinking, I reached across the space between us and touched his arm. Just my fingers against his jacket sleeve. But the contact sent that same electric jolt through me, made my wolf surge forward, made him inhale sharply. Your pack follows you, I said. That means something. His eyes met mine, gold in the morning light. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. No, but I know you helped a stranger without asking for anything. Know you paid off my debt without expecting gratitude. I withdrew my hand, though my skin still tingled where we touched. That tells me enough. Silence fell between us. But it felt different now. Less like strangers sharing space. More like something else. The forest began to change. Trees grew larger, older. Signs of habitation appeared. Cabins set back from the road. Smoke rising from chimneys. Wolves in human form stopping their work to watch our truck pass. They recognized the vehicle. Recognized Kyle. Hands raised in greeting. Children waving. This was his pack. His people. And they loved him. I could see it in their faces. We crested a hill and Silvercrest revealed itself. The main settlement spread across a valley sheltered by mountains on 3 sides. Log buildings with stone foundations built to last centuries. Not the shabby structures of pine wood where we made do with whatever materials we could afford. These were solid, prosperous, beautiful in their rustic grandeur. At the valley's heart stood a lodge that made Pinewood's pack house look like a shed. 3 stories of massive logs and river stone, with wings extending from the central structure. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. Windows gleamed. Home, Kale said quietly. We drove through streets where wolves went about their daily business. A blacksmith hammering metal. A baker pulling bread from outdoor ovens. Children running between buildings in some elaborate game. Normal pack life, except everything was nicer, cleaner, more prosperous than anything I'd known. No one looked hungry here. No one wore clothes held together with patches. My chest tightened. The gulf between my world and Kyle's had never been more obvious. The truck pulled up to the main lodge. A woman waited on the porch, silver-haired, amber-eyed, her arm in a sling, but otherwise looking healthy. Morel Stormridge, Kyle's mother. She descended the steps as we parked, her face breaking into a radiant smile. Kale climbed out first, moving around to open my door before I could do it myself. His hand appeared offered, not demanded. I took it, letting him help me down. Morel reached us before we'd taken 3 steps. There you are, she said, her voice warm with genuine feeling. The girl who saved my life. She pulled me into a hug, gentle because of her injured arm, but fierce in its emotion. I stood frozen, not sure what to do. When had anyone last hugged me? Not since my parents died. 9 years without that kind of casual affection. Thank you, Morel whispered against my hair. Thank you for not leaving me. I couldn't, I managed. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length to study my face. Thea Ashwood, such a lovely name. She took my hand like we'd known each other for years. Come inside, you must be exhausted from the drive. We entered the lodge and I stopped breathing. The interior was magnificent. Vaulted ceilings held up by logs that must have been centuries old. A stone fireplace large enough to stand in. Furniture that looked handcrafted and beautiful. Windows flooding everything with natural light, and wolves everywhere. Moving through hallways, talking in clusters, working at tasks I couldn't identify. They all turned to look. All fell silent. All stared at the stranger their Alpha King had brought home. I wanted to disappear. But Morel kept hold of my hand, kept me anchored. "Everyone," she announced, her voice carrying. "This is Thea Ashwood. She saved my life 2 nights ago. She's our honored guest for the next 3 weeks. I expect you all to make her feel welcome." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the room. Then slowly wolves returned to their tasks. Kael appeared at my other side. "Your room is this way." He led me up a massive staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with doors to a room at the far end. Opened it, stepped aside to let me enter first. The room was larger than my entire cottage. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, covered in quilts that looked hand-stitched. A dresser, a desk, a reading chair by the window. An attached bathroom that I could see through an open door. My duffel bag sat on the bed, looking even more pathetic against all this luxury. "It's too much," I whispered. "It's yours," Kael said simply, "for as long as you're here." He moved to the window, gesturing. "You can see the valley from here." I joined him, looked out over silver crests spread below us, 3,000 wolves living in prosperity and safety. "I don't belong here," I said quietly. His hand found mine. The contact sent sparks up my arm, made my wolf sing. "You belong wherever you choose to be, and right now you chose to be here." I looked up at him, at amber gold eyes that saw too much. "Why did you really ask me to come? It's not just about integrity or the summit, is it?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then so softly I almost didn't hear, "No, it's not." "Then why?" His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Because when I saw you in that forest, something in me recognized something in you. Because your scent makes my wolf restless and certain in equal measure. Because in 32 years I've never met anyone who made me feel like maybe I don't have to carry everything alone." He took a breath. "Because you're my mate, Thea, and I've known it since the moment I caught your scent in the dark." The words hung in the air between us like something physical, solid, undeniable. Mate, I'd known. My wolf had known from the first moment that scent had filled my lungs. But hearing Kael say it out loud made the reality crash over me like a wave. "I know it's fast," he continued when I didn't respond. "I know you barely know me. I'm not asking you to accept the bond right now. I'm just telling you the truth." My mouth was dry. "How long have you known?" "Since the forest." His jaw tightened. "I've spent 6 months in Pinewoods territory on various pack business. I saw you 17 times before that night. Every single time I noticed you. Couldn't stop noticing you. 17 times, he'd counted. "I didn't know who you were," I whispered. "I never even saw you. I made sure you didn't. You were living in pack territory, working off debt, and I had no right to complicate your life before I understood your situation." He released my hand, creating distance. "So I investigated, found out about your parents' death, the debt, the way Pinewood treated you. You investigated me. I needed to know if you were safe, if the debt was legitimate." He moved to the dresser, putting more space between us. "I was gathering evidence about your father's death, the brake failure that killed your parents." My heart stopped. "What about it?" "It wasn't an accident." His voice went hard. "The brake lines were cut. There were rogue scents at the scene that the investigating officer either missed or ignored. Someone wanted your father dead." The room tilted. I grabbed the bedpost for support. "That's not possible. It was ruled an accident. Your father was Alpha of Silver Creek Pack before it was absorbed into Pinewood. Did you know that?" I shook my head. Silver Creek was small, maybe 300 wolves, but it controlled valuable territory, waterfront, access, prime hunting grounds. "After your father died, Bennett negotiated to merge the packs." He watched my face. "Your father's death was convenient for people who wanted that land." "You think Bennett killed my parents?" "I think someone did. And I think the debt they saddled you with was designed to keep you too busy surviving to ask questions." His expression softened. "I'm sorry, I know this is a lot." "A lot. My parents murdered. 9 years of my life stolen." I sat down on the bed before my legs gave out. Kael crossed to me, kneeling, so we were eye level again. "I was going to tell you. After I had ironclad proof. After I could give you justice instead of just suspicions." His hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. "But then you saved my mother, and I realized I couldn't wait anymore. So I paid your debt and brought you here, and now I'm telling you everything." "Everything," my voice cracked. Everything I know, everything I suspect, everything I feel. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. You're my mate. That means your pain is my pain. Your fight is my fight. And whoever killed your parents will answer for it. I looked at him, really looked, at the scars that spoke of battles fought, at the hardness that came from making impossible decisions, at the vulnerability in his eyes that he was letting me see. This was an Alpha King who'd spent 6 months investigating the death of wolves he'd never met, paying off debt for a girl with nothing to offer but integrity. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. Neither do I. He smiled, small and genuine. I've never had a mate before. I'll probably make mistakes. I definitely will. Then we'll make them together. He stood, offering his hand. For now, you should rest. Tomorrow we start preparing for the summit. I took his hand, letting him pull me up. We stood close enough that I could feel his body heat. Kale, I said quietly. Yes. I feel it too. The bond. Since the forest. I met his eyes. I just need time to process everything else. Relief flooded his features. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. He left me alone in the room. A knock came an hour later. It's Morel. May I come in? I opened the door. Kael's mother stood in the hallway with her good arm full of fabric. Dresses, I realized. I hope you don't mind, she said, sweeping into the room. But Kael mentioned you might need some things for your stay. She laid them across the bed. 5 dresses in various colors and styles. Quality fabric and flattering cuts. I can't accept these, I said automatically. Of course you can. You're our guest. Morel's smile was warm. Think of these as work clothes. Work clothes that probably cost more than I made in a month. I touched the fabric, soft, well-made, beautiful. Thank you, I managed. She settled into the reading chair, gesturing for me to sit on the bed. Now, tell me about yourself. So I told her. About my father who'd been alpha of a pack I barely remembered. About my mother who'd sung while she cooked. About the winter night they'd gone to negotiate and never came home. About the debt that had defined my life since. Morel listened without interruption. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You've survived 9 years alone, she said finally. Working, fighting, keeping yourself intact despite everything trying to break you. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You could have given up, become bitter. She leaned forward, but you didn't. You stayed kind, compassionate. You saved my life when you had every reason to worry about yourself first. Anyone would have done the same. No, child, they wouldn't have. Sadness touched her features. Most wolves are good at justifying why someone else's crisis isn't their problem. You didn't justify. You just helped. Kael told you about the mate bond, Morel said. Not a question, I nodded. How do you feel about it? Overwhelmed, uncertain, scared. I met her eyes. But also, right, like some part of me has been waiting for him without knowing it. She smiled. That's the bond. It's not rational. Doesn't care about logic or circumstances. Her expression grew serious. But it's also not everything. Mate bonds create connection. They don't create love. That takes time and trust and choosing each other every day. A knock interrupted us. Mother, stop interrogating her. Kael's voice through the door. Dinner's in an hour. Morel stood with a laugh. She moved to the door, paused. You're welcome here, Thea. Not because you saved my life, though I'm grateful, but because you make my son smile like he's not carrying the weight of the world. That's rare. Precious. She left me alone with those words echoing in my head. I changed into one of the new dresses, deep blue, simple cut. In the mirror, I looked different. Still me, but polished. The dining hall was massive. 50 wolves were already gathered when I arrived. The volume of conversation was overwhelming after years of mostly solitary meals. Kael appeared at my elbow. You look beautiful. Heat flooded my face. The dress is nice. I meant you, but the dress helps. He offered his arm. Come on, I'll introduce you to some people. The next hour was a blur of names and faces. Ethan, the younger wolf from the forest. Bright smile, easy manner, strategic advisor. Sebastian, the silent one. Head of security, intense. Dozens more whose names I struggled to remember. They all treated me with courtesy, some with curiosity, a few with wariness. Dinner was served family style. Platters of roasted meat, vegetables, fresh bread. I took small portions, conscious of not appearing greedy. Kael noticed. You can have more. There's plenty. I'm fine. His fingers brushed mine beneath the table, deliberate, claiming, you don't have to ration here. Take what you want. What I wanted. The concept felt foreign. I'll try, I whispered. After dinner, Kale walked me back to my room. At my door, he stopped. Tomorrow we start preparing for the summit. Ethan will work with you on political dynamics. Sebastian on identifying threats. My mother on protocol. That sounds intensive. It will be, but you don't have to do it alone. He hesitated. I'd like to spend time with you too. Not as Alpha and guest. Just as us. I'd like that. He smiled, genuine, reaching his eyes. Good. There's a trail through the forest I want to show you. Tomorrow evening if you're not too tired. I won't be. He left me with that promise hanging between us. The next 2 weeks developed a rhythm. Mornings with Ethan learning about the packs that would attend the summit. Northern Coalition 5 packs including Silvercrest generally allied. Eastern Coalition aggressive expansionists led by Alpha Brennan who wanted KL's territory. Western packs isolationist unpredictable. Southern Alliance political manipulative. The key, Ethan explained on day 3, is understanding what each pack wants. Brennan wants power. If you know what they want, you can predict what they'll do. What does Kyle want? Stability, peace. Territory secure enough that he doesn't have to fight a new challenge every year. Ethan's expression grew serious. Silvercrest is strong, but strength attracts wolves who want to prove themselves by taking down the strongest. Kale's been fighting that since he took over. Afternoons with Sebastian, who taught me to read body language and identify threats. Watch the hands, he'd say. Watch how they stand. Aggressive wolves lean forward. Wolves planning violence have a specific stillness before they strike. He made me practice in the common room. Point out wolves who are lying. Identify guards stationed at entrances. Notice when someone was carrying a concealed weapon. You're good at this, he admitted after a week. You notice things. I had to. At Pinewood, knowing who was angry could mean the difference between a peaceful day and getting yelled at for something that wasn't my fault. Understanding flickered across his features. Survival skills. Yes. Evenings with Morel learning protocol. Which Alpha to greet first at formal gatherings. How to navigate conversations without accidentally insulting someone's pack. The most important rule, she told me on day 5, is this: be genuine. Wolves can smell deception. If you pretend to be something you're not, they'll know. What if genuine isn't appropriate? Then be genuinely quiet. Better to say nothing than to perform. She smiled. You're good at reading situations. Trust that instinct. And nights with Kyle. He took me on the forest trail. He'd mentioned a path through towering pines that opened onto a clearing where you could see stars unblemished by light pollution. We sat on fallen logs and talked. Do you ever wish you could just walk away? I asked on night 4. Let someone else be Alpha. Every day. He stared at the stars. But walking away means abandoning 3,000 wolves who depend on me. That's a lot of weight. Yes, but it's mine to carry. He looked at me. What about you? Do you wish your parents had never borrowed that money? I considered. Sometimes. But debt taught me things, how to survive, how to value what matters. I met his eyes. If my life had been easy, I might not have stopped to help your mother. He laced our fingers together. The contact sent familiar electricity through me, but different now, less shocking, more grounding. I'm glad you stopped. Me too. By day 8, the mate bond had become impossible to ignore. Every time Kale was near, my wolf rose to the surface, wanting to touch, to mark, to complete the bond that pulled between us like a physical cord. His scent was everywhere in Silvercrest, wood smoke, and autumn rain, making it hard to concentrate. And from the way Kale's eyes tracked me across rooms, the way his hands clenched when we were close, he felt it too. On night 9 in the forest clearing, he finally addressed it. This bond, he said quietly, it's getting stronger. I know. If we complete it, if we mate, there's no going back. The connection becomes permanent. His jaw tightened. I need you to be sure. Not just that you feel the bond, but that you want this, want me, want the life that comes with being my mate. I'd been thinking about nothing else for days. Not just a mate bond, but partnership with an Alpha King. Life at Silvercrest. Wolves who'd look to me for something I'd never been trained to provide. Enemies who'd see me as a weakness to exploit. But also waking up next to someone who saw me, who valued integrity over status, who'd spent 6 months investigating my parents' death because my pain mattered to him. I'm afraid, I admitted, of making mistakes, of not being enough. I'm afraid too, he turned to face me, of failing you, of my enemies hurting you to get to me. We stared at each other in the moonlight. But I'm more afraid of not trying, he said. Of living my whole life wondering what we could have been if I'd been brave enough to reach for it. I thought about the girl I'd been 2 weeks ago, working at the Pinewood Lodge wearing patched dresses, dreaming of nothing more than clearing debt. She'd been surviving, making do. That girl was gone. The woman who remained wanted more, wanted connection and partnership and a future built on choice. Wanted this wolf who knelt in dirt to help strangers. I want to try, I whispered. Kale's eyes flashed gold. Are you sure? Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us, kissed him. His hands came up to frame my face, gentle despite their size. The kiss deepened mate bond, sparking between us like electricity. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine. Thea, I'm sure, I said. Not about everything, not about summit politics or being a good alpha's mate, but about you, about us, I'm sure. He kissed me again. Slower this time. Thorough. When he finally drew back, his eyes glowed amber in the darkness. We should wait until after the summit, he said, voice rough. Complete the bond properly, with ceremony and witnesses. Why wait? Because I want to do this right. Want you to have everything you deserve. His thumb traced my lower lip. And because if we mate now, I won't want to let you out of my sight for the next week, and we have a summit to prepare for. I laughed despite the heat flooding my body. Practical. One of us has to be. He stood pulling me up with him. Come on, before I forget all my good intentions. We walked back through the forest hand in hand. My wolf settled for the first time in days, content with the promise of completion. At my door, Kale kissed me one more time. 3 more days until we leave for the summit. Can you be ready? I thought about everything I'd learned. Political dynamics in threat assessment and protocol. Yes, I said, I'll be ready. He smiled. I never doubted it. 3 days later, we loaded into trucks for the journey to Glacier Highlands. The summit would take place on neutral territory between the major packlands, a resort area that had been prepared for weeks. I rode with Kyle, Ethan, and Sebastian. The drive took most of the day, winding through mountain passes even more remote than those leading to Silvercrest. Nervous, Kale asked as we neared the destination. Terrified, his palm pressed to mine, warm and certain. You'll be fine. Just be yourself. That's all I need. Glacier Highlands revealed itself as we crested the final pass. A cluster of lodges arranged around a central meeting hall, all built in the same rustic Montana style. Trucks and vehicles were already arriving, other packs, other alphas, their advisors and mates and guards. Hundreds of wolves gathering in one place. The energy hit me like a wall. Dominance and power and tension thick enough to taste. These weren't friendly neighbors. These were territorial predators forced to occupy the same space, all watching each other for signs of weakness. We pulled up to the main lodge. Wolves turned to watch, noting Kale's arrival, noting me beside him, calculating what my presence meant. Stay close, Sebastian murmured as we climbed out. Don't wander off alone. And if anyone approaches you when Kale's not present, be polite but give nothing away. I knotted my throat tight. Kale took my hand, making a statement. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories had brought someone. That someone mattered enough to be here. We entered the main lodge. The interior was arranged for the summit, a massive circular table in the center, chairs positioned at precise intervals. Name placards marked each position. Already some alphas had arrived and were staking their territory. A tall woman detached herself from a group near the windows. Beautiful, sharp-edged, with dark hair and calculating green eyes. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who knew exactly how much space she commanded and enjoyed watching others get out of her way. Marcus, she said, approaching with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kale, he corrected mildly. Her gaze slid to me, raking over my simple travel clothes and braided hair with barely concealed disdain. How unexpected. You've brought a companion. Allow me to introduce Thea Ashwood, Kale said, his voice cooling several degrees. Thea, this is Seraphine Vale Beta of the Eastern Coalition. Not Alpha, Beta, but the way she carried herself suggested she wielded significant power, regardless of title. How charming, Seraphine said, though I'm surprised you chose someone so unpolished for such an important gathering. Before I could respond, Kale stepped closer to me, steel beneath silk. I chose someone genuine, someone who understands that strength isn't performed. It's lived. Seraphine's smile tightened. Of course. Well, I'm sure the summit will be educational for her. She retreated with forced grace, but I felt her eyes on me as she rejoined her group. Don't let her get to you, Ethan murmured at my shoulder. Seraphine's been trying to get Kale's attention for years. She sees you as competition. I'm not competition. I'm nobody. You're his mate, Sebastian said quietly. That makes you the most important wolf in this room as far as he's concerned, and everyone else knows it. The next hours were a careful dance of introductions and positioning. Alpha Brennan of the Eastern Coalition, massive aggressive watching Kyle like a wolf watches a rival. The Western Pack representatives taciturn keeping to themselves. The Southern Alliance smooth-talking political everything a negotiation. Through it all, I stayed at KL's side, observing, learning, noticing the patterns Sebastian had taught me to see. Brennan leaned forward when he talked aggressive. The Western Alphas made themselves smaller defensive, but not submissive. The Southern Alliance smiled too much performing. And Seraphine watched me with the specific stillness Sebastian had warned meant violence being planned. That night, lying in the room Kale had ensured was next to his, I couldn't sleep. The weight of all those wolves under one roof, the tension, the sense that something was building toward an inevitable collision. A soft knock on my door made me jump. "It's me," Kale's voice. "Can I come in?" I opened the door. He stood there in the hallway, his hair disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. "I couldn't sleep either," he said. "Thought you might want company." I stepped aside, letting him enter. He moved to the window, looking out over the moonlit mountains. "Tomorrow the formal sessions begin," he said. "It's going to be intense. Brennan's going to push for territorial concessions. The Southern Alliance will try to broker deals that benefit them. And everyone will be watching to see if I show any weakness. You won't." He turned to look at me. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've watched you lead for 2 weeks. Watched your pack love you. Watched you make decisions that prioritize their well-being over political advantage." I crossed to stand beside him. "That's not weakness. That's strength they don't understand." His hand found mine in the darkness. "What if they use you to get to me? Then I'll handle it. I've been handling difficult wolves my entire life. These are just better dressed." He laughed softly. "You're remarkable. You know that?" "I'm terrified." "That's what makes you remarkable. Being terrified and doing it anyway." We stood there together, looking out at the mountains, his hand warm in mine. Tomorrow would bring challenges neither of us could fully predict. But tonight we had this moment, this connection, this certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. "Kale," I said quietly. "Yes. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me when you could have chosen anyone." He turned me to face him, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "I didn't choose you. My wolf knew you. My soul recognized you. That's not choice, it's inevitability." His thumb brushed my cheek. And I've never been more grateful for inevitability in my life. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes glowed gold in the moonlight. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we show them what integrity looks like." He left me alone with those words echoing in my head. I lay in bed, my wolf finally settled, my heart finally certain. Tomorrow would bring the summit, political maneuvering, wolves who'd test me and judge me and try to use me. But I wasn't the girl who'd left Pinewood 2 weeks ago. I wasn't defined by debt anymore. Wasn't invisible. Wasn't alone. I was Thea Ashwood, mate to an Alpha King. And tomorrow I'd prove that compassion wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing of all. The first day of the summit was exactly as intense as Keiko had predicted. 20 alphas sat around the massive circular table, each with their advisors and guards positioned behind them. The air was thick with dominance displays and territorial posturing. Every word carried weight. Every gesture was calculated. I sat behind Kyle's right shoulder, the position Morel had taught me meant trusted advisor. Ethan was on his left, Sebastian standing against the wall with the other guards. But all eyes kept flickering to me, the Omega nobody who'd somehow earned a position at the Alpha King's side. Alpha Brennan opened the proceedings with territorial demands. The Eastern Coalition has documented 17 border incursions by Silver Crest wolves in the past year. We demand formal apology and reparations. Those incursions, Kale replied evenly, were responses to Eastern Coalition rogues attacking our southern settlements. I have records of each incident. Would you like me to present them? Brennan's jaw tightened. We have no rogues. Then perhaps you should investigate your southern packs more carefully. Kale's tone was mild, but the implication was clear. Either Brennan couldn't control his wolves, or he was lying. The debate continued for hours. Territorial disputes, trade agreements, water rights. Every topic became a battle of dominance and political maneuvering. I watched and learned, noted who allied with whom, who stayed silent on which topics, who looked to Kyle for leadership, and who looked for weakness. During the lunch break, I stepped outside for air. The constant tension was exhausting. My wolf was on edge, responding to all the dominant energy in the room. Finding the summit educational, Seraphine's voice behind me, I turned. She stood with two other wolves, both female, both watching me with predatory interest. Very, I said carefully. I'm sure. She moved closer. It must be overwhelming. All this politics and power. So different from, what was it, serving meals at a pack lodge? My stomach dropped. She'd investigated me, knew about Pinewood, knew about the debt. Kale doesn't seem to mind my background, I said, keeping my voice steady. Doesn't he? Seraphine's smile sharpened. Or is he simply being kind? You're new and interesting, a curiosity. But the summit will end, and he'll return to the realities of leadership. To wolves who understand pack politics, who can actually help him navigate these waters instead of just looking pretty at his side. I'm not trying to look pretty. No, you're trying to be genuine. She made the words sound like an insult. How quaint. But genuine doesn't hold territory, doesn't negotiate treaties, doesn't keep 3,000 wolves safe when rivals are circling. One of her companions laughed. She really doesn't know, does she? Know what? I asked, though part of me didn't want to hear the answer. That Kale and I were engaged 5 years ago, Seraphine said, before his father died and he had to focus on holding Silvercrest together. Before politics made a personal mate bond complicated. The words hit like a physical blow. Engaged. Kale had been engaged to this sharp, beautiful, politically connected wolf, and he'd never mentioned it. If you were engaged, I managed what happened. Leadership happened. Responsibility happened. He broke it off to focus on the pack. Her eyes gleamed. But that was 5 years ago. Now Silvercrest is stable. Now he can afford a mate again. And let's be honest, you're a lovely diversion, but when it comes time to choose someone to actually rule beside him, he'll choose someone who can help him, not someone he has to protect. She swept past me, her companions following. Their laughter echoed off the lodge walls. I stood there frozen. Was she right? Was I just a diversion? A curiosity that would fade once Kale realized how much of a liability I was. Don't listen to her. Ethan appeared at my elbow. Seraphine's been bitter about the engagement ending since it happened. She thought being AlphaKing's mate would give her turn. When Kale chose his pack over her, it wounded her pride. She's been looking for revenge ever since. So it's true they were engaged. Yes, but it ended 5 years ago and Kale's never looked back. Ethan's expression was serious. You're not a diversion, Thea. You're his mate, the real thing. What he had with Seraphine was political arrangement. What he has with you is bond. I wanted to believe him, but Seraphine's words had found the fears I'd been trying to ignore. That I wasn't enough, that eventually Kale would realize he'd made a mistake. The afternoon session was even more contentious. Brennan pushed harder on territorial concessions. The Southern Alliance proposed trade agreements that would benefit them at Silvercrest's expense. The Western packs remained silent watching. Through it all, I noticed something. Seraphine kept whispering to Brennan, small conversations during breaks. Glances exchanged across the table. They were coordinating, planning something together. I leaned forward slightly, catching Kale's attention. When he glanced back, I mouthed, Seraphine and Brennan, allied. His eyes sharpened, a tiny nod of acknowledgement. He'd suspected, but my confirmation helped. The debates continued until evening. By the time the session ended, I was exhausted from the constant tension. Every word felt like a battle, every silence a trap. Dinner was a formal affair, long tables, carefully arranged seating that mixed the packs. I found myself seated across from one of the Western Alphas, a quiet wolf named Garrett, who'd barely spoken all day. You're the one who saved Morell's Stormridge, he said after several minutes of silence. I blinked, surprised. Yes, heard about that. Left your bonding ceremony to help a stranger. He studied me. That takes courage. Or foolishness. Haven't decided which. Maybe both. He smiled slightly. Maybe, but the Western packs value actions over words. What you did, that was action. Real action. Not political posturing. It was the first genuinely kind thing anyone besides Kasel's pack had said to me since we arrived. Thank you, I said quietly. The debates tomorrow will get worse, Garrett continued. Brennan's going to escalate. He wants Kale to lose his temper. Make a mistake. His eyes met mine. But I wanted you to know, not all of us want to see Silvercrest fall. Some of us remember what it was like before Kale's father brought stability to the territories. Remember the constant wars, the chaos. You're warning me. I'm saying watch your back and tell your alpha to watch his. He stood, nodded once, and left. I found Kyle afterward, pulled him aside, and told him about both conversations. About Seraphine's revelation, about Garrett's warning. Kale's jaw tightened when I mentioned the engagement. I should have told you about Seraphine. It was 5 years ago and it meant nothing, just a political arrangement my advisors thought would strengthen alliances. But I should have mentioned it. Why didn't you? Because it didn't matter. She didn't matter. Not the way you do. He cupped my face. You're not a diversion, Thea. You're not a curiosity. You're my mate, the real thing, the only thing that's felt real in years. I wanted to believe him, tried to ignore the small voice in my head that whispered all the reasons Seraphine might be right. The second day of the summit started badly. Brennan came out swinging. The Northern Coalition has controlled too much territory for too long. It's time for redistribution, for balance of power. Balance, Cale replied carefully, or Eastern Coalition expansion. If Silvercrest can't maintain its holdings, other packs should have opportunity to fill that vacuum. Silvercrest maintains its holdings just fine. Do you? Brennan leaned forward, aggressive, challenging. Because from where I sit, you're spread thin, 3,000 wolves across 50,000 acres. Your father's death left gaps in leadership that still haven't been filled. You're vulnerable, Stormridge. Everyone in this room knows it. The table went silent. This was it, the direct challenge everyone had been waiting for. Cale's voice went cold. If you think Silvercrest is vulnerable, you're welcome to test that theory. But I should remind you what happened to the last wolves who made that mistake. Is that a threat? It's a fact. The tension ratcheted higher. I could feel dominance rolling off both alphas in waves. The other wolves at the table shifted uncomfortably, caught between two predators squaring off. Perhaps we should take a break, one of the Southern Alliance alphas suggested nervously. No need. Cale's gaze never left Brennan. Unless the Eastern Coalition has actual concerns to discuss, instead of baseless accusations. Brennan smiled. Oh, I have concerns, like your choice to bring an Omega to the summit. Makes you seem distracted, focused on personal indulgences instead of pack business. Every muscle in my body went tight. He was using me, just like Seraphine had warned. My personal life, Cale said with dangerous calm, is not summit business. Isn't it when the Alpha King makes decisions based on sentiment instead of strategy? When he pays off debts for wolves outside his pack? When he brings someone with no political experience, no training, no connections to the most important gathering in the territories? Brennan's smile widened. That's everyone's business, because it shows judgment, or lack thereof. I felt eyes turn to me, judging, calculating, seeing exactly what Brennan wanted them to see: weakness, distraction, poor judgment. And there was nothing I could say, nothing I could do that wouldn't make it worse. The debates devolved from there. Every topic became personal. Every discussion circled back to Kyle's leadership, to Silvercrest's supposed vulnerability, to me. By lunch, I was shaking with suppressed emotion, anger, humiliation, fear that Brennan was right, that I was a liability, that bringing me here had been a mistake. I escaped to the forest behind the lodges. Needed air, needed space, needed to breathe without feeling everyone's eyes on me. Running away, Seraphine's voice. I spun. She stood on the path, looking pleased. I needed air. Understandable, that was brutal in there. She moved closer. Brennan's right, you know. You're a weakness, a distraction. Every wolf in that room sees it. Then why are you here? I asked. If I'm so irrelevant, because you're not irrelevant. You're an obstacle. Her smile turned predatory. Cale won't see reason while you're in his head, won't make the smart political choices, won't accept that ruling requires sacrifices like personal happiness. You mean he won't choose you? I mean, he won't choose what's best for Silvercrest, and that makes him weak, which makes this the perfect time for the Eastern Coalition to step in, to offer alternatives. The pieces click together. You're working with Brennan. You're helping him undermine Cale. I'm helping restore balance. Silvercrest has had too much power for too long. It's time for redistribution. She stepped closer. And you're going to help. Why would I help you? Because if you don't, what happens to Kyle will be on your conscience. Her eyes gleamed. There's a plan in motion, one that ends with Kale losing everything: his territory, his pack, his position. Unless you remove yourself from the equation, go back to Pinewood, disappear. Give him space to make the decisions he needs to make without sentiment clouding his judgment. And if I refuse, then tonight during the social gathering, certain events will unfold. Events that will make it very clear that Kale can't protect you, can't protect his pack, can't protect anything. She leaned in close. And when wolves see an alpha who can't protect his own mate, they stop following him. They start looking for stronger leadership. My heart was hammering. You're going to hurt him. I'm going to save him. From himself, from you. She straightened. Think about it. You have until tonight to decide. Disappear quietly or watch Kale fall because he chose sentiment over sense. She walked away, leaving me alone in the forest with a choice that felt impossible. I could leave, protect Kale by removing the weapon Brennan and Seraphine were using against him, or I could stay. Trust that what we had was real, strong enough to weather whatever they planned. But what if Seraphine was right? What if my presence was the thing that would destroy him? I sat on a fallen log, my head in my hands. My wolf was snarling. She knew Seraphine was enemy, knew leaving was wrong. But my human mind kept circling back to the same fear. What if I was the problem? What if the best thing I could do for Kyle was leave footsteps on the path made me look up? Not Seraphine, Garrett the Western Alpha from last night. Saw you come out here, he said. Saw Seraphine follow. Figured you might need backup. Did you hear enough? He sat on the log beside me. She's lying, you know, about helping Kale. She wants him broken, wants Silvercrest weak so the Eastern Coalition can move in. But she's right about me being a liability. Everyone sees it. Everyone sees what Brennan wants them to see. Garrett's voice was gruff but kind. That's how political manipulation works. They take something real, you and Kyle's bond, and twist it. Make it look like weakness instead of strength. How is it strength? I can't help him. Can't contribute. Can't do anything but stand there while Brennan tears him apart. Can't you, Okuyu? Garrett looked at me directly. I've been watching these sessions. Watching you. You notice things, see patterns. You warned Kale about Seraphine and Brennan coordinating. That's valuable. It's not enough. Maybe, maybe not. He stood. But running won't help him. We'll just prove Brennan right that you're a weakness Kale's better off without. That he can be broken by attacking what he loves. He left me with that. I sat in the forest as shadows lengthened, thinking, processing, trying to separate truth from manipulation. Seraphine wanted me gone. That much was clear. Whether to help Kyle or destroy him, I wasn't sure. Maybe both in her twisted logic. Brennan wanted Kale off balance, wanted him making mistakes, wanted to prove Silvercrest was vulnerable. And I wanted Kale safe, wanted him strong, wanted to be an asset instead of a liability. But running felt like giving up, like admitting defeat before the real battle even started. My wolf snarled agreement. We didn't run. We fought, even when we were scared. I stood brushing dirt from my dress, made my decision. I would stay, would trust the bond, trust Kyle. Trust that together we were stronger than apart no matter what Seraphine claimed. And if she and Brennan had something planned for tonight, I'd face it head on. I walked back to the lodges as the sun set, found Kyle in his room pacing like a caged animal. There you are. Relief flooded his features. Sebastian said you went into the forest. I was about to come looking. Seraphine found me. His eyes flashed gold. What did she say? I told him everything, the threats, the ultimatum, the plan to prove he couldn't protect me. When I finished, Kale was vibrating with barely contained rage. I'm going to kill her. No, you're going to outmaneuver her. I put my hands on his chest, feeling his heart race beneath my palms. Whatever they have planned, we'll face it together, and we'll show everyone that what we have isn't weakness. It's strength they don't understand. He stared at me. You're not leaving. No, I'm not leaving. I met his eyes. I'm staying, I'm fighting, and I'm trusting that you and I together are stronger than anything they can throw at us. His hands came up to frame my face. You're sure because if something happens to you, then we handle it together. I covered his hands with mine. That's what mates do, right? Face the impossible together. He kissed me then, hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. When we pulled apart, his eyes were glowing. Whatever happens tonight, he said, stay close to me. Don't let them separate us. And if anything feels wrong, you run. You get to safety, and you let me handle it. Kale, promise me. Please. I looked at the fear in his eyes, the love, the absolute terror of losing me. I promise, I whispered, but only if you promise the same. If things go wrong, you don't sacrifice yourself to protect me. We both get out. Together. Together, he agreed. We went down to the social gathering hand in hand. The main lodge had been transformed. Tables with food and drink, wolves mixing more casually than during the formal sessions, music playing from somewhere. It should have been relaxed, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. I stayed at Kael's side, hyper-aware of everything. Every wolf who looked at us, every conversation that stopped when we approached, every smile that didn't reach eyes. Seraphine was holding court near the windows surrounded by Eastern Coalition wolves. She caught my eye and raised her glass in a mock toast. The message was clear. It was happening, soon. Kael, Sebastian appeared at his shoulder. We need to talk. Now. What's wrong? Just come with me. Both of you. He led us to a side room. Ethan was already there, his expression grim. We found something, Ethan said. Evidence that Brennan and Seraphine have been planning this for months. They're going to stage an attack. Make it look like Kael can't protect his own mate at a neutral summit. Undermine his authority. When, Kael demanded. Tonight, during the gathering. Sebastian's jaw was tight. They've hired rogues, professional fighters. They're going to try to kidnap Thea. My blood went cold. Kidnap me. Make it look like you're vulnerable. That being with Kael puts you in danger, that he can't keep you safe. Ethan pulled out papers, messages, plans, payment records. We intercepted these an hour ago. They're already here on the grounds. Waiting for the signal. Kael's hands clenched. How many? 3 that we know of, maybe more. We can cancel the gathering, lock down the premises. That proves their point, I interrupted, that you're scared, that you can't handle threats. I don't care about proving points if you're in danger. But I do. I looked at him directly. This is exactly what they want. You panicking, making decisions based on fear instead of strategy, proving you're distracted by me. You're not a distraction. I know, but we need to show them that. Need to show everyone that this bond makes us stronger, not weaker. My mind was racing. What if we use their plan against them? Let them make their move, but be ready. Prove that we can handle it together. Absolutely not. I'm not using you as bait. I'm not bait. I'm your mate, your partner. I put my hands on his chest. Trust me. Trust us. We can do this. He stared at me, conflict warring in his eyes. If something goes wrong, then you and Sebastian and every wolf loyal to you will be right there. We won't be unprepared. We'll be ready. I looked at Sebastian. Can you position guards without them knowing? Make it look like business as usual while actually having backup in place? Yes, but Thea, these are professional fighters. They're dangerous. So am I. The words surprised me, but they felt true. I've survived 9 years of debt and poverty. I've learned to read threats and spot danger. I'm not helpless. Kael closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were gold, his wolf close to the surface. If we do this, he said slowly, you don't take risks, you don't try to fight them, you stay where I can reach you, and you let me and the guards handle it. Understood? Understood. And the moment it's over, I'm claiming you in front of every wolf at this summit. Full mate bond, public. No more waiting. Heat flooded through me. Kael, those are my terms. We do this together, and then I make sure every wolf here knows you're mine. Permanently. Unquestionably. I looked at him. At the fierce protectiveness and love burning in his eyes. At the determination to end this threat and claim our future in the same breath. Deal, I whispered. Sebastian and Ethan exchanged glances. You're both insane, Ethan muttered, but I'll position the guards. Carefully, Kael said. Nothing obvious. Make it look like normal security. They left to make arrangements. Kael and I stood alone in the small room. I'm terrified, I admitted. Me too. He pulled me close. But we're doing this together. And after tonight, no one will ever question this bond again. We returned to the gathering, to the music and conversation and false pleasantries. But now I knew what to look for. 3 rogues, professional fighters, waiting for a signal. I scanned the room, looking for wolves who didn't quite fit, who stood wrong, who had that specific stillness Sebastian had taught me meant violence waiting to happen. There, by the door, a wolf who looked like a guest but whose eyes never stopped moving, calculating, assessing, there, near the refreshment table. Another one, casual posture but coiled energy. I couldn't spot the third. Kael felt my tension. You see them, 2 of them, can't find the third. Sebastian will handle it, just stay close. We mingled, made polite conversation, pretended everything was normal while my heart hammered against my ribs. Seraphine approached. Enjoying the gathering, Marimta? Very much, I said evenly. Good. These events can be so unpredictable. Her smile was sharp. You never know what might happen. She walked away. That was the signal, I was sure of it. Everything happened fast. The lights flickered, went out, plunging the room into darkness. Screams, confusion. Wolves calling out for light, for calm, for explanations. Hands grabbed me, strong, pulling me away from Kale. Thea, his voice already moving, already fighting toward me. I twisted, used the moves Sebastian had shown me in training, stomped down hard on an instep, heard a grunt of pain. The grip loosened. I drove my elbow back, connected with something solid. The hands let go, but there were more. Multiple attackers, professional coordinated. I fought, kicked and scratched and bit, refused to go quietly, refused to be the helpless damsel Seraphine expected. Then lights blazed, emergency generators kicking in. The room was chaos. Wolves fighting, guards engaging the rogues. Sebastian had 2 of them pinned already. And Kale had shifted. A massive black wolf with eyes like molten gold stood between me and the 3rd rogue, the one I hadn't been able to spot, the one who'd been dressed as a server. The rogue looked at Kyle, looked at me, made his choice. He lunged. Kyle met him midair. The collision sounded like thunder. They went down in a tangle of fur and fangs and violence. I pressed back against the wall, my hands shaking. This was real. This was happening. The rogue was good, trained, fast, but Kyle was an alpha king. Every movement was precision and power, and 13 years of fighting to hold territory. It was over in seconds. The rogue on the ground, Kale's jaws at his throat. Not killing, but absolutely capable of it. Sebastian had the other 2 secured. Guards flooded in from all directions. They'd been positioned, waiting ready. The room went silent, every wolf staring at the tableau. Kale shifted back to human form, stood there in the wreckage of the attack, his eyes still glowing gold. These rogues, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, were hired to attack my mate, to make it look like I couldn't protect her, to undermine Silvercrest's strength. He looked directly at Brennan, at Seraphine. Did you think I wouldn't know? Did you think I wouldn't be prepared? He gestured to the captured rogues. Sebastian, get them talking. Find out who hired them, names, evidence, everything. Already have some of that, Sebastian said grimly. He held up a phone, one of the rogues. Messages from a number registered to the Eastern Coalition. Payment transfers, instructions. Brennan's face went white. That's impossible. I had nothing to do with. Sit down. Kale's voice went cold. Alpha command, compulsion woven through the words. Brennan sat before he could stop himself. Sebastian, present the evidence. The next hour was a systematic dismantling of the conspiracy. Messages between Seraphine and Brennan, payment records, plans written out in detail. Everything. By the end, the room had turned. Wolves who'd been neutral now looked at Brennan and Seraphine with disgust. Even the Eastern Coalition wolves were backing away, distancing themselves. This is a violation of summit neutrality, one of the Southern Alliance alphas said. Attacking another alpha's mate on neutral ground. This is grounds for complete territorial forfeit. I'm not asking for forfeit, Kale said. His hand found mine, pulled me to his side. I'm asking for justice. Public. Witnessed. He looked at me, at the woman who'd fought her attackers instead of freezing, who'd trusted him enough to walk into danger, who'd proven that what we had was strength, not weakness. Seraphine Vale, you are stripped of beta status, exiled from the Northern Territories. If you return, it will be considered an act of war. Seraphine's face went ashen. You can't. I can, and I am. He turned to Brennan. Alpha Brennan, the Eastern Coalition will surrender the disputed territories, will pay reparations, will submit to summit oversight for the next 5 years, or face trial by combat. Brennan looked at Keiko, at the wolf who'd just taken down a professional fighter in seconds, at the absolute certainty in his eyes. We accept the terms, Brennan said hoarsely. Good. Kale's gaze swept the room. Let this be a lesson. Silvercrest does not show weakness. We show strength, mercy, justice. And anyone who mistakes compassion for vulnerability will learn exactly how wrong they are. He turned to me. In front of 300 witnesses, he cupped my face in his hands. You were magnificent, he said softly. Brave and strong and everything I knew you were. Then he kissed me. Not gentle, not careful, claiming, possessive, making a statement to every wolf in the room. Mine. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing. There's one more thing. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. Thea Ashwood is my mate, my true mate, and I claim her now in front of all of you as my partner, my equal, my future. He pulled his shirt aside, exposing the junction between neck and shoulder, the claiming spot, where a mate's mark would be visible to everyone. If you accept, he said quietly, just for me, mark me. Show them what we are, what we've chosen. My hands were shaking. This was permanent, public, irrevocable. But I'd already made my choice, in the forest, in his room. The moment I decided to stay and fight instead of run, I let my wolf surface, felt my canines extend, and I bit down on his shoulder, marking him, claiming him, completing the bond that had been pulling us together since that first night in the forest. He gasped, his hands tightened on me, and I felt the bond snap into place. Permanent, unbreakable, perfect. When I pulled back, the mark was there, clear and visible. Proof that K.L. Stormridge, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, belonged to me as much as I belonged to him. He marked me in return, gentle despite his strength. And when his teeth released, I felt complete for the first time in my life. The room erupted in howls, not anger, not protest, acknowledgement, acceptance. We'd won. The rest of the summit proceeded with notably less hostility. Brennan and the Eastern Coalition wolves kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact. Seraphine was escorted from the premises that night, her exile immediate and absolute. The Western Pax, led by Garrett, formally proposed an alliance with Silvercrest. The Southern Alliance suddenly became much more accommodating in their trade negotiations. Everyone had seen what happened when you underestimated K.L. Stormridge. More importantly, they'd seen what happened when you threatened his mate. But the formal proceedings weren't over. On the final day, the summit held a public forum where any wolf could raise concerns or propose policies. It was meant to give voice to wolves who weren't alphas or advisors. Common pack members who lived with the consequences of decisions made at these gatherings. I stood at the back of the room, not planning to speak, just observing, learning. But as I listened to the discussions, something became clear. The alphas were talking about territories and trade, about power and resources and political advantage. No one was talking about the wolves who actually lived in the disputed border regions. The families split by territorial lines. The young wolves who couldn't mate across pack boundaries because of ancient grudges. The economic hardship caused by trade restrictions. I thought about my parents, about being orphaned at 16 and burdened with debt designed to keep me too busy surviving to ask questions. About 9 years of invisibility and grinding poverty. About all the wolves at this summit who had similar stories but no voice to tell them. My hand went up before I could talk myself out of it. The moderator, a neutral wolf from one of the Western packs, looked surprised. Yes, the young woman in the back. 300 wolves turned to look at me, every alpha, every advisor, every guard and attendant and political player. My throat went dry, but I'd fought rogues 2 nights ago. I could speak in front of a room. I'm Thea Ashwood, I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. I'm not an alpha, not a diplomat. I don't have decades of political experience. Then perhaps you shouldn't be speaking, someone muttered, one of the Southern Alliance wolves. Perhaps, I agreed, but I've listened to 3 days of debates about territories and trade and power, and I've noticed something. No one's talking about the wolves these decisions actually affect. We're all wolves, Brennan said, his tone dismissive. These decisions affect everyone. Do they affect alphas in their inner circles while everyone else just lives with the consequences? I took a breath. You've been arguing about the border between Silvercrest and the Eastern Coalition. But has anyone asked the wolves who live in those border regions what they want? Has anyone considered that maybe they're tired of being pawns in territorial disputes? Pack structure requires hierarchy. An alpha from the Southern Alliance began. I'm not arguing against hierarchy. I'm asking if we're serving our packs or our egos. I looked around the room. How many families have been split by territorial lines? How many young wolves can't mate because their chosen partner belongs to a rival pack? How many communities suffer because trade restrictions benefit alphas but hurt common wolves? Silence fell, uncomfortable, heavy. My parents died when I was 16. I continued. Car accident, brake failure. I was left with a debt that took 9 years to work off, 9 years of poverty and invisibility, and being reminded every day that I was a liability. Not a person, just a problem to be managed. I met Kyl's eyes across the room. He was watching me with pride and love and absolute support. It wasn't until I met someone who saw me as a person instead of a debt that I realized how broken that system was. How many wolves are invisible because pack politics matter more than pack welfare? This is all very touching. Seraphine's replacement in the Eastern Coalition spoke up. But what exactly are you proposing, that we dismantle pack structure, eliminate territorial boundaries? No, I'm proposing we remember why we have packs in the first place. To protect each other, to create community, to make life better for everyone, not just those at the top. I straightened. And I'm proposing that at future summits, we include voices from border regions, from common pack members, from wolves who live with the consequences of decisions made in rooms like this. That's not how summits work. Then maybe it's time summits work differently. I looked at Kale. The Alpha King I know values integrity over politics, values seeing people instead of positions. Maybe it's time more leaders did the same. I sat down, my heart hammering. I just challenged the entire political structure of the Northern Territories. In front of everyone. This would either change things or destroy me. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Alphas conferring with advisors. Wolves from different packs eyeing each other with new consideration. Garrett stood. The Western packs support this proposal. We'll send representatives from our border communities to future summits. One of the Southern Alliance Alphas rose. The Southern Alliance is willing to consider community input on trade policies. More Alphas stood, one by one. Not everyone. Brennan remained seated glowering. But enough, a majority. KL stood last. Silvercrest will implement community councils. Wolves from every region will have input on policies that affect them. And at next year's summit, we'll include those voices. He looked at me. Because my mate is right. We've been so focused on power that we forgot about the wolves we're supposed to serve. The moderator looked stunned. Is there consensus on this? Nods around the room. Not unanimous, but close enough. Then let the record show, the moderator said slowly, that the Continental Summit has voted to expand representation. Details to be worked out, but the principle is established. I sat there barely breathing. Had that really just happened? Had I just changed summit policy by standing up and speaking? The forum concluded. Wolves filed out, some glaring at me, others nodding with respect. Garrett stopped by my chair. That took guts, he said, and it was needed. The Western packs have been saying similar things for years. But coming from you, from someone who's lived it, that carried weight. I just said what was obvious. Nothing's obvious in politics, but you made it impossible to ignore. He clasped my shoulder briefly. You're going to make a good Luna Queen. Luna Queen. The title still felt impossible, but maybe I was growing into it. KL found me as the room cleared, pulled me into his arms without words, just held me, his heartbeat steady against my ear. You were incredible, he murmured, brave and smart and exactly right. I might have just made you a lot of enemies. You made me proud. He pulled back to look at me. And you made changes that should have been made years ago. That took courage. Or foolishness. Maybe both. He smiled. But I've always thought courage and foolishness were pretty close together. That evening, Silvercrest held a private gathering, just our pack and the Western packs who'd become allies. No formal protocols, no political maneuvering, just wolves sharing food and stories and relief that the summit was over. Morel pulled me aside. I knew you'd be good for him, for Silvercrest, but I didn't realize how good. I just said what needed saying. You did more than that. You changed how people think about leadership, about whose voices matter. She hugged me with her good arm. Your parents would be proud. My parents, who'd died to protect me from something, who'd left me debt designed to keep me invisible and silent. Kale says he's still investigating their deaths. He is, and he will find justice for them. But Thea, she looked at me seriously, you've already honored them by surviving, by staying kind despite everything, by speaking up when others stay silent. That's the best tribute you could give. I thought about that as the evening continued. About the girl I'd been 3 weeks ago serving meals at Pinewood Lodge, dreaming of nothing more than clearing debt. About the woman I'd become mate to, an Alpha King voice for the voiceless fighter against injustice. About how sometimes the most important journey is the one from invisible to seen. Kale found me later alone on a terrace overlooking the mountains. The summit grounds were beautiful in moonlight, silent now, peaceful, the tensions of the past days bleeding away into relief. Tomorrow we go home, he said, settling beside me. Back to Silvercrest. Home, I tested the word. It's strange, I've lived in Pinewood my whole life, but it never felt like home. Not really. Just a place I survived. And Silvercrest, I looked at him, at amber gold eyes that saw everything. Silvercrest feels like possibility, like a future I get to choose instead of one chosen for me. Good. He laced our fingers together, the mate bond humming between us. Because I want to build that future with you, not as alpha and mate performing roles, but as partners, equals. I don't know how to be an alpha's mate. Neither do I. He smiled, but we'll figure it out. Make mistakes, learn, do better. What if I'm not good at it? You just changed summit policy by standing up and speaking truth. I think you'll manage. He turned serious. But Thea, I need you to know something. You don't have to be anything other than yourself. Don't have to perform or prove yourself or become someone you're not. The wolf I fell in love with is the one who left a bonding ceremony to save a stranger, who fought rogues instead of freezing, who spoke truth to power when everyone else stayed silent. That's who I want beside me. Not some polished version, just you. Just me, I repeated. Broken windows and patched clothes and all. Especially that, because those things made you who you are. Compassionate, strong, real. His hand cupped my face. I love you, Thea Ashwood. Not despite your past, but including it. All of it. My throat tightened. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and overprotective and occasionally terrifying. He laughed. Occasionally. When you shifted during the attack, you were very terrifying. Good, that was the point. He grew serious. About completing the mate bond, we marked each other publicly, but there's more. A ceremony. Traditional vows, if you want that. Do you? I want whatever makes this feel real and permanent and celebrated. Want the pack to witness our commitment. Want you to have everything you deserve. I thought about bonding ceremonies, about the one I'd missed at Pinewood to save Morel, about how that choice had led me here to this moment with this wolf. I want ceremony, I said, but I also want it to mean something, not political theater, something real. Then we'll make it real. He stood pulling me up with him. Come on, there's something I want to show you. He led me down from the terrace through the now quiet summit grounds to a small clearing in the forest. Moonlight filtered through the trees, painting everything silver. This is where I knew, he said, that night we met, when your scent hit me and my wolf recognized you. I've been coming back here every night of the summit, just to remember. Remember what? That all the political maneuvering and power struggles and territorial disputes, none of it matters as much as this, as you, as what we have. He turned to face me. So I want to promise you something. Here, now, just us and the moon, and the bond between us. He took my hands in his. I promise to see you not as mate or Luna or political advantage, but as Thea, the wolf who chose compassion over ceremony, who fights when others run, who speaks truth even when it's hard. His eyes glowed gold in the moonlight. I promise to trust you, your instincts, your choices, your voice, especially when it challenges me. I promise to protect you, not by keeping you safe and small, but by standing beside you, fighting with you, making sure you have the space and support to become everything you're meant to be. His voice went soft, and I promise to love you, every day, in every way, for as long as we both live. Tears streamed down my face, not sad, overwhelmed. This was more than mate bond. This was choice, commitment, partnership. My turn, I whispered. I took a breath. I promise to see you, not as Alpha King or leader or position, but as KL, the wolf who helped a stranger in the forest, who carries loneliness like armor, who wants to be good enough and already is. I promise to trust you, your decisions, your leadership, your love, even when my fears tell me I'm not enough. I promise to stand with you, not behind you or ahead of you, beside you, equals, partners, building something together that's stronger than either of us alone. My voice broke. And I promise to love you, your scars and your strength, your vulnerability and your courage, all of it, for as long as we both live. He kissed me then, gentle and fierce and full of everything we'd promised. The mate bond sang between us deeper, now richer, complete in ways that went beyond marking. This was it, the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped being the invisible Omega from Pinewood and became something new. Thea Ashwood, mate, partner, Luna Queen. The wolf who chose compassion and found love, who fought fear and found strength, who was invisible and found voice. When we pulled apart, Kyle was smiling through his own tears. Let's go home. Yes, I said, let's go home. We returned to Silvercrest 2 days later. The entire pack turned out to welcome us back. 3,000 wolves lining the streets, howling approval, celebrating their alpha's return and his mate. Morel had organized everything. A formal bonding ceremony for the following week. Invitations sent to allied packs. Preparations in full swing. You didn't have to do all this, I told her as she showed me the plans. Of course I did. You're family now, and family deserves celebration. She hugged me. Besides, after what you did at the summit, speaking up, changing policy, the pack wants to honor you properly. The ceremony was held in the same forest clearing where Kale and I had shared our private vows. But this time 3,000 wolves bore witness. I wore a dress Morel had commissioned, white silk with silver embroidery, simple but beautiful. My hair was loose flowers woven through it, traditional for bonding ceremonies. Kale wore formal black, the silver crest prominent on his chest. His eyes never left me as I walked toward him through the crowd. The ceremony itself was traditional. Vows spoken publicly, rings exchanged, silver bands engraved with our names. The pack's acceptance given through howls that echoed through the mountains. But the best part came after. When Kyle and I shifted together, running through the forest with the pack following, 3,000 wolves moving as one. Powerful, united, family. My white silver wolf ran beside Kyle's massive black wolf. Different sizes, different colors, but perfectly matched. The bond visible even in this form. We ran until dawn, until exhaustion and joy blended together. Until the pack began peeling off, heading home, leaving us alone in the forest we both loved. We shifted back to human form, stood together watching the sun rise over Silvercrest, over our home, our pack, our future. What are you thinking? Kale asked. That I almost missed this, almost stayed at that bonding ceremony, almost let debt define my whole life. I leaned into him. I'm glad I didn't. So am I. He kissed my temple, though I'm a little biased. It was just a little, maybe more than a little. We stood there as the sun painted the mountains gold, as Silvercrest woke below us, as the future we'd chosen together stretched out bright and possible. 1 year later, I stood in the same forest clearing with different news. I'm pregnant, I told Kyle, watching his face carefully. His eyes went wide, then wet, then blazing with joy. He picked me up, spinning me around, laughing and crying at the same time. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. He set me down carefully like I might break. His hand went to my still flat stomach. A baby. Our baby. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He kissed me, terrified, overwhelmed, excited, but mostly happy. The pregnancy was smooth. The pack celebrated. Morel started knitting before I was even showing. Ethan made terrible jokes about dirty diapers. Sebastian began designing security protocols for a royal infant. And Kale hovered, constantly, worried about everything. I'm pregnant, not fragile, I told him when he tried to carry me up the stairs for the third time that week. I know, but humor me. You're impossible. You love me anyway. Unfortunately. He grinned. Fortunately. Our daughter was born on a spring morning. Fast delivery, no complications, healthy lungs that she demonstrated immediately. She had Kale's dark hair and my pale blue eyes. Tiny. Perfect. Ours. What should we name her? Kale asked, holding her with the kind of careful reverence reserved for the most precious things. I thought about my parents, about the sacrifice they'd made to protect me, about the legacy I wanted to pass to this tiny wolf. Lyra, I said, for my mother, and Hope, because that's what she is, our hope for the future. Lyra Hope Stormridge. Kale tested the name. It's perfect. She's perfect. He looked at me. You're perfect. I'm exhausted and sweaty and definitely not perfect. Perfectly imperfect, then. He kissed my forehead. Thank you. For her. For us. For choosing this life. I looked at our daughter, at the mate who'd seen me when I was invisible, at the pack celebrating outside our window, at the future we'd built together from nothing but compassion and choice and love. Thank you, I whispered back, for seeing me, for loving me, for making me believe I could be more than my past. You were always more. You just needed someone to remind you. Lyra made a small sound. We both looked down at her, at this perfect combination of us, this symbol of what we'd created together. She's going to change the world, Kale said softly. Maybe, or maybe she'll just change us. I smiled. Either way, she'll be loved, protected, seen. That's what matters. That's what matters, he agreed. And in that moment, holding our daughter surrounded by love and pack and possibility, I finally understood what home meant. Not a place, not a building, not even Silvercrest with its rustic beauty. Home was this, was choosing each other every day, was building something together, was looking at the future and seeing not fear, but hope. I'd left a bonding ceremony to save a stranger. That stranger had been Kael's mother. That choice had led me to Kael, to love, to partnership, to becoming Luna Queen of Silvercrest, to this moment, this life, this perfect, imperfect, beautiful future. And I wouldn't change a single choice that brought me here. Not one.